Hello, and welcome to my review of Cyberfrog 2 Rekt Planet. You can find the written version of this review in the link in the description. There you can also find some ways to support me if you'd like to see me continue doing comic book reviews like this. Also, please consider liking and subscribing and leaving comments so I can get your feedback on how I did with this review. Cyberfrog 2 Rekt Planet is the sequel to the smash hit indie darling Cyberfrog Bloodhoney. With a production time of over 3 years, the old saying, better late than never, is more than apropos. Was the lofty wait worth it? Has Ethan Van Sciver managed to get lightning to strike twice? This is my review for Rekt Planet. With a career spanning nearly 30 years in the comic book industry, Ethan Van Sciver is a venerable master of his craft. He brings all of that creative skill to bear in making Rekt Planet. The art is nothing short of amazing. The visual storytelling in Rekt Planet is wonderful. The story makes full use of comic books as a visual medium to paint vivid imagery that combines with the written dialogue to reach the reader and draw them into the world of Cyberfrog. I find myself taking note of several points where this technique was particularly stark for me. Lily is the first human we see in the book, and the visual metaphor is palpable. She is a child that was born and raised in this destroyed Earth. She has never experienced anything else, and this is masterfully displayed visually by her not only wearing red clothing, but her skin is actually painted red. She is literally dyed in the rules of this world. This is juxtaposed with her mother, Heather, who isn't wearing red, and her skin is unpainted. Heather represents the world as it was, before the invasion, and a hope that it can someday return to that state. This interesting color language extends to other characters. The ones from the 90s typically don't show up painted red or wearing red, which helps them to stand out from the characters that are born in or have fully accepted this new way of life. The art throughout the story is jaw-dropping. Ethan Van Sciver's mastery of brilliantly detailed scenes of gore and viscera is tense and horrifying without ever crossing the line into the silliness of gore for gore's sake. Cyberfrog's action scenes are fluid and dynamic, making each fight a feast for the eyes. The expressiveness in the characters adds weight and realism to the story. It feels like both a comic book and watching a film at the same time. The dialogue is well written. Cyberfrog is punchy, witty, and sarcastic. It makes every page he is on fun to read. Froggy has the flavor of heroes like Spider-Man and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He captures that 90s style in a way that is sorely missing from the modern comic book landscape. Heather Swain's indomitable spirit comes through in her dialogue. Her conversations with Cyberfrog feel natural and fun, while carrying the tragic undertones of the suffering each character has gone through since they are being separated. This culminates beautifully in one scene where Heather and Cyberfrog are talking under a starlit night sky. Speaking of good characters, Colin, the leader of the community of survivors, has great interactions with Cyberfrog. The clash between Colin and Cyberfrog represents the underlying theme of the story. In a world-ending crisis, is mere survival enough, or do humans need freedom to truly live and flourish? Which is more important for humanity? This is a struggle that Cyberfrog ponders in his own mind throughout the story, and this conflict with Colin is a perfect literary device to bring that question to the forefront of readers' minds. Lily has great development throughout the story. Her relationship with Cyberfrog is a strong theme in the book and a motivator for the events that take place. She starts off cynical and jaded, a girl that knows nothing aside from the demolished earth and the pain of not knowing where her father is. She starts off cold towards Cyberfrog, but over time, his antics win her over. The climax of the story is thrilling and full of action and suspense. It drew me in as I wanted to know how the events would wind up. The story ends on a cliffhanger, but sets up events for the next book very nicely. I felt satisfied with the ending overall. Rekt Planet is a stellar comic book. It takes everything great about Bloodhoney and kicks it into the next gear. I would recommend this book to comic book fans, fans of good storytelling, and fans of that lost 90s style. Now we enter the spoiler section where I will go over some of the little details in the story that left questions in my mind and things that perhaps Ethan Van Sciver can work on addressing in maybe future prints of this book or in the sequels to make the story seem a little bit more cohesive to readers. One question that I had throughout the story is why Cyberfrog never bothers to look for Kelsin or Salamandroid. When Heather asks about Sal, Cyberfrog's response comes off like he really couldn't care less about the fate of his own brother. Putting that aside, Cyberfrog knows that he can't achieve his mission without being connected to Kelsin, so the idea of tracking her down should at least be something he's thinking about, if not actively pursuing. The closest explanation I can think of is that Cyberfrog is a character that lives and thinks in the short term. He's not a big picture frog, so to speak. So his primary concern is protecting the community of survivors, even though he could be doing that so much more effectively with his full strength. Taking this thinking one step further and deferring to Van Sciver's writing, it could have been his goal to impart to the reader that Cyberfrog has in a sense been merely surviving since he woke up. He has found Heather and Lily and devoted himself to protecting the community, surviving, and protecting this small thing. In a sense, he has become much like Colin. While seeking out Kelsin and Salamandroid would forego the safe and immediate situation in pursuit of the dangerous and unknown, seeking the goal of freeing humanity and the world from the Vespes. This brings me to the subvillains. Rekt Planet does a good job of having the subvillain This brings me to the subvillains. Rekt Planet does a good job of having the subvillains that appear in the story play important roles that ultimately set events in motion. Scorpion and Spite play an amazing part. Scorpion, knowing that Cyberfrog is the natural enemy of the Vespes, elects to give him some help in the form of a Vespes translation program. I'm always a fan of clever Machiavellian villains that will offer help to the hero so that they can defeat a larger threat. It makes me very curious to see what Scorpion's ultimate plan is and how he expects Cyberfrog to play into it. Spite has a very cool battle with Cyberfrog as he takes a dive in order to upload the translation program to Cyberfrog. I wish that the details surrounding this fight were a little clearer. Before the fight even begins, Cyberfrog is hearing what I assume is a Vespes communication, and he is able to somewhat translate bits and pieces of the transmission. It wasn't clear to me why Cyberfrog was able to hear this transmission and how he could understand and translate small parts of it. My first guess is that maybe because Spite was in proximity waiting to attack Cyberfrog, there was some sort of remote connection between Cyberfrog and Spite that was already starting to download bits and pieces of the translation program to Cyberfrog. My second guess and explanation is that perhaps since Cyberfrog has been getting small updates to his database throughout the story, perhaps during that scene he was getting bits of info from his database on the Vespes. If this is true, I have to assume that when Cyberfrog is fully connected to Kelsin, he would have been able to translate the Vespes anyway. My understanding of Kelsin's powers is that she is like an internet, connecting Cyberfrog to the minds of every living thing on Earth. The question is unclear about whether the Vespes are part of that network or not. My understanding of Cyberfrog's connection to Kelsin is that Kelsin is like an internet, and she connects Cyberfrog to every living thing on the Earth. My question with that is, does that include the Vespes, which have now colonized the Earth and are living on the Earth? Or is Cyberfrog only connected to every native creature on the Earth? Because of this being unclear, it's kind of hard to suss out how Cyberfrog is able to translate the Vespes signal that he is hearing. Another thing that wasn't entirely clear to me is whether Device is the Pyrdanian tech entity that lives inside of Spite. And since it spoke in a different manner than Spite does, is it a separate consciousness from Spite? It's my current understanding that Spite and Device are in fact two separate beings. And if this is indeed the case, then that's not made entirely clear in the story, where it looks like as soon as Cyberfrog defeats Spite and Device leaves Spite, that Spite is dead. Perhaps Ethan wanted the existence of Device to be a surprise to the reader for those that are familiar with the classic Cyberfrog. I think this could have been established by having a page or a panel that shows Scorpion handing over to Spite a piece of Pyrdanian tech and telling him that it is the translation program. That way the reader knows that there is something inside of Spite that is supposed to give Cyberfrog the translation. Then the reveal can be that the piece of Pyrdanian tech was in fact Device himself. Dystopia is an interesting character. I like how she used her powers to lure Lily into danger. There is a point with Colin that I felt a little curious about. In the conversation with Cyberfrog, Colin makes a point of how every member of the community matters. Then later in the story, he engages in this plot with Dystopia that is basically sending Lily and Heather to their deaths in order to lead Cyberfrog away from the community. This suggests that Colin is willing to kill off members of the community at best, and at worst he is actively working with the Vespes. This lines up with the Vespes Lord's comments to Cyberfrog that the Vespes have been essentially free-range farming humans in the survivor communities. This leads me to believe that it is possible that Colin is working for the Vespes as what amounts to a farmer that is cultivating the community as Vespes food. Another possibility that hangs in the air is that Dystopia could be using her hex powers to amplify Colin's own paranoia and manipulate him. This would make Dystopia the agent of the Vespes. If these are intentional breadcrumbs that Van Sciver is leaving for readers to pick up on and cultivate speculation, it's well done. If not, it's a slight mark against Ethan's writing. Nothing too critical, just a situation where a little more clarity in characterization and establishing motives would have helped more involved readers to understand the logical through lines in the story. During the climax of the story, the Vespers really make a splash as despicable villains that are truly evil and malicious. The way they communicate perfectly encapsulates that feeling of a swarm of buzzing bees. The swarm of Vespers around Cyberfrog attacking while spewing spiteful comments, lies, and taunts is an experience that I had never had before in reading a comic book. They are all individuals, yet they are a hive mind. It is no coincidence that this battle also very spookily parallels internet mobs and the swarms people experience on social media when in the process of being canceled. The Vespes hierarchy is being revealed little by little throughout the story, and I am a fan of the way this is being handled. In this book, we are introduced to the Foragers and a single Lord Vespes. I expected there must be ranks above the Lord. There simply must be a queen. The Vespes kidnap Lily, and after severely damaging Cyberfrog, they leave him for dead. Heather does her best to help keep him alive when Salamandroid appears, carrying the heart of Kelsin. It's a good ending, but it might strike some as a little out of nowhere that the very things that could save Cyberfrog's life show up on the very last page of the comic. I think the story would be served well by little editor notes that tell the reader what books they can read to learn more about where characters are coming from. For example, a note on the page where Sal appears telling the reader that they can read Death's Sting if they want the story of how Sal found Kelsin and tracked down Cyberfrog will let the reader know that this appearance isn't entirely out of nowhere, even if it appears to be so just reading Rekt Planet. All in all, Rekt Planet is a great comic book. Ethan Van Sciver has delivered in spades for what is most definitely his greatest comic book work to date. It sets a high standard and makes me hopeful that Cyberfrog 3 can surpass even that mark. There are a few muddy spots in the writing and characterization, but it's nothing that detracts too much from the overall experience. I highly recommend this comic book. Thanks very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. Peace.